The sky turned red on a Tuesday morning. Was drinking coffee in her small apartment in Seoul when the first ships appeared. She remembered looking out the window and thinking that the clouds looked strange. Then she realized they were not clouds at all. They were shadows, massive shadows cast by things that should not exist. The ships were bigger than mountains. They hung in the sky like floating cities made of black metal, counted 12 of them before she stopped counting. There were too many. They blocked out the sun and turned day into night. Her phone buzzed with emergency alerts. The television showed the same images from every country: New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Cairo. Every major city had these ships above them. News anchors spoke in shaking voices about first contact, about the possibility of communication, about hope. The hope lasted exactly 4 hours. At noon, the ships opened fire. Was underground when Seoul died. She had gone to the subway station to help her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Park, who was too scared to move. The old woman held his hand and prayed while the ground shook above them. Then came a sound like the world breaking apart. The ceiling cracked. Dust fell like snow. People screamed and ran in every direction. Lost her grip on Mrs. Park's hand. She was thrown against a wall by the force of something she could not see. Everything went dark. When she woke up, she was buried under concrete and twisted metal. Her left arm was broken. Her mouth was full of blood. She could hear nothing but a high ringing sound that would not stop. It took her 6 hours to dig herself out. She moved one piece of rubble at a time, using her good arm and her teeth and her stubborn refusal to die in the dark. When she finally pushed through to open air, she wished she had stayed buried. Seoul was gone. The buildings she had known her whole life were now piles of smoking stone. The streets were rivers of ash and broken glass. Bodies lay everywhere, twisted into shapes that did not look human anymore. The air smelled like burning plastic and something worse that did not want to name. She walked for 3 days through the ruins. She found no one alive. She found her family's apartment building, or what was left of it. The entire structure had collapsed into itself like a crushed box. She dug through the rubble with her bare hands until her fingers bled. She found her mother's wedding ring in a pile of dust that used to be the kitchen. She did not find her mother. On the 4th day, saw them for the first time. The invaders, the conquerors, the things that had ended her world. They walked through the streets like tourists visiting a museum. There were 3 of them, tall and gray-skinned with too many joints in their limbs. They wore armor that looked like liquid silver and carried weapons that hummed with blue light. One of them kicked a human skull out of its path without even looking down. Hid behind a collapsed wall and watched them. They were talking to each other in a language that sounded like grinding stones. One of them laughed. It was the worst sound had ever heard. She understood then that this was not an invasion. It was not a war. Wars happen between equals. This was something else. This was what happened when a child stepped on an anthill. The ants did not matter. Their lives did not matter. Their deaths were not even noticed. Stayed hidden until the creatures moved on. Then she crawled deeper into the ruins and found a hole to sleep in. She did not cry. She was too tired to cry. She just lay in the dark and listened to her own breathing and wondered why she was still alive when everyone she loved was dead. The answer came to her slowly over the following weeks. She was alive because she refused to die. And she refused to die because somewhere deep inside her broken heart, a fire had started burning. It was small at first, just a tiny ember of rage, but it grew a little brighter every day. She started paying attention to the invaders. She watched their patrols from hidden places. She studied their movements, their schedules, their habits. She noticed that they were careless. They left their equipment lying around. They did not bother to guard their supply stations. Why would they? The humans were all dead or running. The humans were nothing. Found a crashed ship in what used to be a park. It was small, probably a scout vessel. The pilot was dead, its gray body still strapped into the seat. felt nothing as she dragged the corpse out and searched its pockets. She found a small device that looked like a tablet. When she touched it, symbols appeared on the screen. Alien symbols, a language she could not read. She took it anyway. Over the next month, gathered everything she could find. Broken pieces of alien technology. Human computers that still worked. Books, tools, anything that might be useful. She built herself a shelter in an old subway maintenance tunnel that the invaders had not found. She set up a small workshop with stolen solar panels and salvaged equipment. And she began to learn. The alien tablet was her greatest treasure. She spent hours every day staring at its symbols, trying to find patterns. She matched them with images, with sounds, with actions. She was an engineer. She understood systems, and language was just another system waiting to be decoded. It took her 3 months to learn her first word. It meant power. 3 more months gave her 50 words. A year gave her basic reading ability. The tablet contained technical manuals, navigation charts, communication logs. It was a window into the minds of her enemies. What she found there made her laugh for the first time since the invasion. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Dominion. They were a coalition of 12 species who had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had never lost a war. They believed they were the masters of all creation, chosen by the universe itself to rule over lesser beings. And they thought humans were animals. The reports described Earth's population as primitive fauna. The invasion was called a resource extraction operation. Human deaths were not counted because humans did not count. They were pests, vermin, background noise in the grand story of galactic civilization. Read these words in her dark tunnel, surrounded by the wreckage of her world, and she felt the ember in her heart grow into a flame. They had made a mistake, the greatest mistake in their 10,000 years of conquest. They had killed almost everything she loved. They had taken her home, her family, her future. They had left her with nothing except one small, precious gift. They had left her alive. And they had left her angry. Looked up at the ceiling of her tunnel, imagining the ships that still hung in the sky above. She thought about the laughing soldier who kicked human skulls like garbage. She thought about the reports that called her people vermin. She made a promise in that moment, not to herself, not to her dead family, not to the ghosts of 7 billion humans. She made a promise to the creatures who had burned her world without a second thought. One day she would make them remember this planet. One day she would make them remember her species. One day she would teach them what humans were capable of when they had nothing left to lose. Picked up her tablet and went back to studying. She had work to do. 3 years had passed since the sky turned red. Moved through the ruins of Seoul like a shadow. She knew every broken street, every collapsed tunnel, every hiding place that the invaders had never found. She had mapped the entire city in her mind, marking the safe paths and the dangerous zones where patrols walked. Tonight she was hunting. The power station sat on the edge of what used to be the business district. It was a temporary structure built by the Dominion to supply energy to their communication array. 20 soldiers guarded it, walking in slow circles around the perimeter. They were bored. They had been bored for 3 years. Nothing ever happened on this dead planet. Watched them from a hole in a nearby building. She counted their steps. She timed their rotations. She noted which guards talked to each other and which ones stood alone. She had been watching this station for 2 weeks, learning its rhythms like a song. She was not alone anymore. Crouched beside her, his face hidden in the darkness. He was a former soldier, one of the few who had survived the initial bombardment. He had spent the first year after the invasion hiding in the mountains, eating rats and dreaming of revenge. When found him, he was half dead from hunger and ready to walk into an alien patrol just to end his suffering. She had given him something better than death. She had given him purpose. On her other side sat a girl of barely 16 who had lost her entire family in the first hour of the attack. She was small and quiet, but her fingers moved across keyboards faster than anyone had ever seen. Before the invasion, she had been arrested twice for hacking into government systems. Now, she used those skills to crack alien security codes. Behind them, hidden in a safe room 2 blocks away, Doctor monitored their communications. She was 63 years old, a retired surgeon who had pulled more bullets and shrapnel out of human bodies in the past 3 years than in her entire previous career. She was the heart of their small resistance, the one who kept them all alive and sane. 4 people against an empire that spanned the galaxy. It was almost funny. Raised her hand and made a signal, nodded and disappeared into the darkness. 2 minutes later, she heard a distant crash, metal falling on concrete. The guards at the power station turned toward the sound. 3 of them moved to investigate, leaving a gap in their patrol. Slipped through the gap like smoke. The explosive device in her bag was crude but effective. She had built it herself from stolen Dominion power cells and human chemicals. It was small enough to fit in her palm but powerful enough to level a building. She had tested smaller versions in abandoned areas, learning how the alien technology reacted to human modifications. She reached the main generator without being seen. The humming machine towered above her, covered in symbols she could now read easily. She placed the device at its base, set the timer for 15 minutes and turned to leave. A guard stood in her path. He was young for a Dominion soldier, his gray skin still smooth and his eyes still curious. He stared with something that might have been surprise. Perhaps he had never seen a human up close before. Perhaps he thought they were all dead. Did not give him time to call for help. She moved faster than he expected. Her knife, made from sharpened alien metal, found the gap in his armor where the neck met the shoulder. The blade slid in easily. The guard made a soft gurgling sound and fell. Caught his body before it hit the ground. She dragged him into the shadows and left him there. Her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. She had killed before. She would kill again. There was no room for guilt in the world the Dominion had created. She rejoined at their meeting point. They ran through the dark streets, putting distance between themselves and the power station. Was waiting for them with a vehicle she had salvaged and repaired, its engine modified to run silent. They were 3 blocks away when the explosion lit up the night. The power station erupted in a pillar of blue fire. The blast wave knocked down half a building. For a moment, the ruins of Seoul were bright as day, and could see the shapes of Dominion soldiers running in confusion. Then the communication array went dark. For 6 hours, every Dominion force on Earth lost contact with each other. 6 hours of silence. 6 hours of chaos. 6 hours during which the mighty conquerors stumbled around like blind children, unable to call for help or send reports or coordinate their patrols. It was not a victory, knew that. One power station meant nothing to an empire that controlled thousands of worlds, but it was a message, a statement, proof that the vermin could still bite. The next morning, intercepted the garrison commander's report to his superiors. His name was an officer who had been given Earth as a retirement posting. Easy duty on a dead world, nothing to worry about. The report called the explosion an equipment malfunction. Did not mention the dead guard. He did not mention the possibility of sabotage. To admit that humans had attacked his station would be to admit that humans were capable of attacking. And that was impossible. Everyone knew that. Smiled when she read the report. Pride was a weapon she could use. Over the following months, the attacks continued. A supply convoy lost to a collapsed bridge, a patrol that walked into a minefield, a fuel depot that caught fire in the night. Each incident was small. Each incident was explained away as accident or bad luck, and each incident killed Dominion soldiers and stole Dominion resources. Its network grew. Survivors emerged from hiding, drawn by rumors of resistance. A farmer from the countryside who knew how to make explosives from fertilizer. A mechanic who could repair anything with enough spare parts. A teacher who had memorized the locations of every military bunker in the region. They came one by one, broken people looking for something to believe in. Gave them that belief. She trained them. She armed them. She taught them to read Dominion language and understand Dominion technology. She turned scared survivors into soldiers. But she never let them call her a leader. She was just another ghost in the wreckage, another shadow in the night. The Dominion would never learn her name because she would never give them a name to learn. Asked her once why she did not want credit for what she had built. They were sitting in their underground base, surrounded by maps and weapons and stolen equipment. The question seemed to confuse him. He was a soldier. He understood ranks and command structures. Explained it simply. If the Dominion thought there was one leader, they would hunt for that leader. They would focus their energy on finding and killing one person. But if they thought the resistance was everywhere and nowhere, if they thought every shadow might hide an enemy, then they would have to fear everything. Fear was a weapon too, maybe the best weapon of all. A year after the first attack, something changed. Commander was recalled to face questions about the equipment failures on his watch. His replacement was a creature named, a high prelate with cold eyes and a reputation for cruelty. Did not believe in equipment failures. He believed in enemies. The patrols tripled, the checkpoints. Dominion soldiers began searching every ruin, every tunnel, every hiding place they could find. They captured survivors and questioned them. Some talked, some did not. Either way, they died. Watched the change in tactics and felt something she had not felt in years. Hope was taking them seriously, was scared. The Dominion had finally noticed the ants, and the ants were just getting started. Called a meeting of her network. 50 people gathered in an abandoned factory, the largest group she had ever assembled. They looked tired and hungry and afraid, but they also looked ready. She stood before them and spoke in a quiet voice that somehow reached every corner of the room. The enemy knew they existed now. The enemy was coming for them, but the enemy still did not understand what they were fighting. The Dominion saw them as pests to be exterminated. They did not see them as what they truly were. They were humanity. They were the survivors of a murdered world. They were the inheritors of 7 billion ghosts who demanded justice. And they were only beginning. 7 years after the fall, the Dominion learned a new word. They called it the handprint. It appeared everywhere, burned into the walls of destroyed outposts, painted in ash on the hulls of wrecked vehicles, carved into the armor of dead soldiers. A simple human handprint, the universal symbol of a species that refused to die. High Prelate stared at the latest report on his command screen. Another convoy destroyed, 12 soldiers dead. Supplies worth more than this entire planet had been lost to fire and explosives. And there, on the only surviving piece of wreckage, was that damned handprint. He had been hunting these creatures for 4 years. He had captured hundreds of them. He had tortured them for information. He had executed them in public displays meant to terrify others into submission. Nothing worked. For every human he killed, 2 more seemed to appear from the ruins. Requested reinforcements from the Galactic Council. The response was laughter. The great High Prelate, veteran of 100 campaigns, needed help dealing with primitives. Perhaps he was getting old. Perhaps he should consider retirement. Did not retire. He doubled his efforts. He brought in specialists, trackers, interrogators, scientists who studied human biology to find weaknesses. He built a network of informants among the surviving human population, offering food and safety in exchange for information. Some humans took his offer. They pointed fingers at their neighbors. They whispered names and locations. They betrayed their own kind for scraps from the conqueror's table. Expected this, she had planned for it. The informants received exactly the information she wanted them to have: false locations, fake names, trails that led nowhere. When Dominion soldiers raided a suspected hideout, they found empty rooms and handprints on the walls. When they arrested suspected resistance members, they captured nobody important. The real network operated in layers. Each cell knew only what it needed to know. If one group was captured, they could not reveal the others. The structure was invisible, like roots spreading beneath the ground. And the roots had spread far beyond Korea. Stood in her command center, a converted subway station hidden beneath the ruins of Seoul. Screens covered the walls, showing maps and reports from across the planet. 3 years ago, she had commanded 50 fighters. Now she commanded thousands. In China, a former factory worker named Wei led a cell that had destroyed 3 mining operations. In Japan, a fisherman named had sunk 2 Dominion supply ships using modified torpedoes. In Europe, scattered groups were just beginning to organize, reaching out through coded radio signals for guidance and support. Sat at her console, fingers dancing across keyboards as she monitored Dominion communications. She was 23 now, no longer a scared teenager but a master of electronic warfare. She had cracked the enemy's encryption codes so completely that she often knew about their operations before their own soldiers did. Commanded the ground forces. He had trained hundreds of fighters in guerrilla tactics, teaching them to strike fast and disappear. He had developed new weapons from hybrid technology, combining human engineering with stolen Dominion components. His soldiers were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but they fought with a fury that machines could not match. Dr. ran the medical corps. She had trained field medics across 3 continents, teaching them to treat wounds that human doctors had never seen before. She had developed countermeasures to Dominion biological agents. She had saved more lives than she could count. Together, they had built something that should not exist: an army without a country, a resistance without resources, a fire that burned in the ashes of a dead world. Felt that fire growing. His reports to the Galactic Council became increasingly desperate. He described an enemy that adapted to every tactic, that learned from every defeat, that seemed to grow stronger with every loss. He warned that the humans were not like other conquered species. They did not accept defeat. They did not surrender. They did not die quietly. The Council ignored him. Humans were primitives. The Dominion had conquered 1,000 species. This was no different. Intercepted these communications and shared them with her commanders. She wanted them to understand something important. The Dominion's greatest weakness was not their technology or their tactics. It was their belief that they could not lose. That belief made them blind. It made them careless. It made them vulnerable. The time had come to exploit that vulnerability. Gathered her senior commanders in the underground station. Was there, his face harder than stone. Watched from her console, still monitoring enemy signals. Sat quietly in the corner, her gentle presence a reminder of what they were fighting for. Others had joined them over the years. A brilliant chemist named who had developed new explosives. A former pilot named who dreamed of one day flying again. A quiet man named Minyu who never spoke about his past but fought with the desperation of someone who had lost everything. Told them her plan. They were not going to win this war on Earth. They could kill Dominion soldiers forever and it would not matter. The enemy had unlimited resources, unlimited ships, unlimited soldiers. Fighting them planet by planet was hopeless. But there was another way. The Dominion was not one species. It was 12 species bound together by fear and tradition. They had conquered the galaxy by convincing everyone that resistance was impossible. Their power came not from strength alone, but from the belief in their strength. What happened if that belief was shattered? The Galactic Council met once per cycle on a station called Throne Prime. Every leader, every commander, every important figure in the Dominion gathered there to celebrate their eternal rule. It was the heart of their empire, the symbol of their power. Wanted to strike that heart. The room fell silent, stared at her as if she had gone mad, even stopped typing. What proposed was not just difficult, it was impossible. Throne Prime was the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. No enemy had ever come within 1,000 light-years of it. Smiled, that was exactly why it would work. The Dominion expected attacks on their military bases. They expected sabotage on their supply lines. They expected resistance on conquered worlds. They did not expect a strike at the heart of their civilization, because such a strike was unthinkable. Humans, she reminded them, were very good at thinking the unthinkable. Over the next 5 years, they prepared, developed infiltration programs that could slip through Dominion security systems, trained a special unit of fighters for off-world operations, created weapons small enough to smuggle but powerful enough to cripple a space station, studied stolen navigation charts until he knew the route to Throne Prime better than any Dominion pilot. They stole ships. Piece by piece, component by component, they built a small fleet from salvaged parts. They trained crews. They practiced maneuvers. They prepared for a mission that most of them did not expect to survive. Spent those years becoming something she never wanted to be. She became a symbol. The handprint was not just a mark of defiance anymore. It was her. She was the ghost that haunted Dominion dreams. She was the shadow that killed their soldiers in the night. She was the voice that whispered to conquered peoples across the galaxy, resistance is possible. On the day they finally launched, 12 years after the fall of Earth, stood on the bridge of a stolen cruiser renamed the Last Sunrise. Her hair had turned gray. Her face was lined with scars. Her eyes held a cold fire that had burned for more than a decade. Behind her stood the impossible, a crew of humans who had learned to fly alien ships, a fleet of vessels that should not exist, an army that had risen from the ashes of extinction. Before her lay the stars. Gave the order. The engines fired. The Last Sunrise and her sister ships accelerated toward the darkness between worlds, toward the heart of an empire that did not know they were coming. The ghosts of Earth were going to war. Throne Prime hung in the void like a jewel made of steel and light. The station was older than human civilization. It had been built during the founding of the Dominion, 10,000 years ago, when the first 3 species had agreed to unite and conquer the stars together. Over the centuries, it had grown. New sections were added. New species joined the coalition. The station became a city, then a world, then a monument to power so vast that most beings could not imagine it. The Hall of Eternal Victory sat at the station's core. It was the largest enclosed space ever constructed, a chamber so huge that clouds sometimes formed beneath its ceiling. The walls were covered with the banners of conquered worlds, thousands of them, representing every species the Dominion had crushed over 10. Earth's banner hung in a forgotten corner. It was small and faded. Nobody ever looked at it. Today, the hall was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. High commanders from 12 species, prelates and admirals and governors, scientists and diplomats and spies. They gathered once per cycle to celebrate their eternal rule and remind themselves of their greatness. They did not notice the 3 maintenance workers moving through the station's lower levels. Minyu led the infiltration team. He was a small man, easy to overlook, which was exactly why I had chosen him. He wore a stolen uniform and carried stolen credentials. He walked with the tired shuffle of someone who had mopped floors for years. No one gave him a second glance. Behind him walked a young fighter named. They pushed a cleaning cart filled with supplies. Normal supplies, cleaning chemicals, equipment, nothing suspicious. The explosives were hidden inside the chemical containers, had designed them herself. They looked exactly like standard cleaning agents. They smelled like standard cleaning agents. They would pass any scanner in the galaxy. But mixed together in the right proportions, they could tear a hole in a starship hull. The team moved through the station for 3 days. They mapped security patrols. They identified weak points. They planted devices in locations that had identified through months of analyzing stolen blueprints. Each device was small. Each device was harmless alone. Together, they formed a network that could cripple the station's entire power grid. On the 4th day, Minu sent a signal, one word: ready. The last sunrise waited at the edge of sensor range, hidden behind a small moon that orbited a gas giant. Stood on the bridge, watching the stars and counting the seconds until the moment arrived. Her fleet was laughable by Dominion standards. 7 ships, most of them barely functional. 300 fighters, most of them volunteers with minimal training. Against the forces defending Throne Prime, they would last approximately 4 minutes. But was not planning to fight. Sat at her console, fingers hovering over keys that would change history. She had spent 5 years building this moment. 5 years writing code that would slip through Dominion firewalls. 5 years creating a virus that would spread through their communication networks faster than they could stop it. Stood by the weapons station, though he would not use it. His soldiers were still on Earth, still fighting, still dying for a cause they might never see completed. He carried their hopes with him like a weight on his shoulders. Waited in the medical bay, prepared for casualties they all knew were coming. She had stopped counting the lives she had saved years ago. She had also stopped counting the lives she had lost. Checked the time. The ceremony in the Hall of Eternal Victory was beginning. Every important figure in the Dominion was now in one place, watching displays of their own magnificence, congratulating themselves on their eternal power. She gave the order. Minu's devices activated simultaneously. The explosions were small, carefully calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimum detection. Power conduits ruptured. Backup systems failed. Emergency protocols triggered and then crashed as virus spread through the network. The lights in the Hall of Eternal Victory flickered. For a moment, no one reacted. Power fluctuations happened. Systems malfunctioned. It was annoying but not alarming. The celebration continued. Then every screen in the hall went dark. Every speaker crackled with static. Every neural interface flickered with an unfamiliar signal. And a human face appeared. Looked directly into the eyes of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She saw their confusion, their annoyance, their disbelief. She allowed herself a small smile. "You came to our world," she said. Her voice echoed through the hall, through the station, through every Dominion communication channel in the sector. "You burned our cities, you killed our families, you called us vermin." The crowd stirred. Security forces moved toward the screens, trying to shut down the transmission. They could not. This virus had locked them out of their own systems. "You were wronged." The shields around Throne Prime dropped. No one understood how. The shield generators had been functioning perfectly. There was no attack, no damage, no explanation. They simply failed all at once, leaving the station exposed. In the command centers, alarms screamed. Officers shouted orders. Ships scrambled to defensive positions. But they were too slow. They had never needed to be fast. The last sunrise appeared on their sensors. A single ship, smaller than most of their patrol vessels. It should have been nothing. It should have been target practice. But it was not alone. Had spent years reaching out to other conquered species. Quiet communications, careful words, stories of Earth's resistance, of humans who fought back, of an empire that could bleed. Most species did not respond. They were too afraid, too beaten, too broken to imagine defiance. But some listened. Ships emerged from hiding places across the sector. Small ships, old ships, ships that belonged to species the Dominion had dismissed as cattle. They were not an army, they were barely a fleet, but they were something the Dominion had not seen in 10,000 years. They were rebellion. The Dominion forces hesitated. Their commanders screamed orders, but the orders contradicted each other. Defend the station, attack the intruders, protect the council. Nothing made sense. Nothing followed protocol. Minu's team struck again. Secondary explosions tore through the station's weapons platforms. Navigation systems went offline. The great warships of the Dominion drifted helplessly as their targeting computers crashed. In the Hall of Eternal Victory, panic erupted. The most powerful beings in the galaxy pushed and shoved like frightened animals. Their guards formed protective circles, but there was nothing to protect against. The enemy was not coming for their bodies. The enemy was coming for their dignity. Transmission continued. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, as she spoke to the conquered peoples watching across the galaxy. They told you they were gods. They told you resistance was impossible. They told you to accept your chains and be grateful for the privilege of serving them. The last sunrise passed through the gap where shields had been. It did not fire weapons. It did not attack soldiers. It simply flew, slow and steady, broadcasting its message to every world that could receive it. Look at them now. Look at the masters of the universe. Look at the conquerors of 1,000 worlds. On screens across the galaxy, species who had bent their knees to the Dominion watched their rulers stumble through a darkened hall. They watched security forces fail to stop a single small ship. They watched the mighty brought low by creatures they had called vermin. They are not gods, they bleed, they break, they fall. Paused, the moment stretched across light years. And if we can rise, so can you. The transmission ended. The last sunrise turned and accelerated away from Throne Prime. The ragged fleet of rebel ships followed. Dominion forces gave chase, but their systems were still compromised. Their ships were still confused. The rebels disappeared into the darkness between stars. Behind them they left chaos. The Galactic Council emerged from the Hall of Eternal Victory shaken and furious. They demanded answers. They demanded vengeance. They demanded that someone explain how this could have happened. No one could. The official reports called it a minor security breach. The official statements promised swift retaliation. The official position was that nothing had truly changed. But everything had changed. Across the galaxy, on 100 conquered worlds, beings who had given up hope years ago began to whisper. They whispered about the human ships. They whispered about the fallen shields. They whispered about the message that had interrupted the ceremony of their masters. They whispered about rebellion. The Dominion had ruled for 10,000 years by making its subjects believe that resistance was impossible. That belief had been shattered in a single night by a handful of survivors from a dead world. The fire that had lit in the ruins of Sol had spread to the stars. And it was only beginning to burn. The battle lasted 11 hours. It was not supposed to be a battle at all. Its plan had been to strike, broadcast, and escape, show the galaxy that the Dominion could be hurt, then disappear before their forces could respond. Clean, simple, survivable. But the Dominion responded faster than anyone expected. Their recovery systems had backups that even had not discovered. Within minutes of the last sunrise's departure, their fleet was operational again. Within hours, they had tracked the rebel ships to a remote asteroid field where had planned to hide. The trap became a cage. Stood on her bridge as enemy ships surrounded them. Dozens of warships, hundreds of fighters, more firepower than all of human history combined. Her 7 small vessels huddled together in the shadow of a dead rock, waiting for the end. Looked at her with steady eyes. We knew this might happen. She nodded. They had always known. From the beginning, from the first explosion in Sol, they had understood that they might not survive to see victory. They had chosen to fight anyway. His voice came over the communication system. Medical Bay is prepared. Whatever happens, we'll be ready. His fingers flew across her console. I'm trying to find a gap in their formation. "There might be a way out if she stopped. Her face fell. "No, there's no way out." The Dominion commander's voice echoed through their ship. It was. Of course it was. He had followed them across the stars to finish what he had started on Earth. "Human vessel, you have demonstrated courage but not wisdom. Surrender now and I will grant you quick deaths. Resist and I will make your suffering legendary." Smiled, she had expected threats. She had prepared a response. Her voice went out on all frequencies. Not just but to every ship in the sector. To every rebel vessel hiding in the asteroid field. To every planet where conquered peoples were listening. "High Prelate, you destroyed my world. You killed my family. You have hunted me for 12 years. And yet here I stand, on the bridge of one of your own ships, looking at your fleet with no fear in my heart." She paused, let the words sink in. "Do you know why I am not afraid? Because you have already done everything you can do to me. You have taken everything I loved. You have broken everything I built. You have given me nothing left to lose. And a human with nothing to lose is the most dangerous thing in the universe." His response was cold. Pretty words from a dead creature. "Your rebellion ends today." "My rebellion ended the moment it began," said. "I never expected to survive. I never expected to win. All I expected was to show the galaxy that the Dominion could be, and I have done that. Whatever you do to me, you cannot undo what has already been done." The first Dominion ships moved forward, their weapons charged with killing light. And then something unexpected happened. From the asteroid field, from behind tumbling rocks and in the shadows of ancient debris, more ships emerged. Not human ships, not even ships that recognized. Vessels from a dozen different species, hidden and waiting, drawn by the broadcast at Throne Prime. They were few, they were weak, they had no real chance against the Dominion fleet. They came anyway. The leader of this ragged armada broadcast his own message. His species had been conquered 500 years ago. His people had served the Dominion for generations. But tonight, he said, they remembered what freedom meant. Other voices joined him. A pilot whose world had been stripped of resources. A captain whose family had been taken as slaves. A commander who simply could not watch anymore. Screamed orders: attack the rebels, destroy them all, leave no survivors. The battle began. It was a slaughter. The rebels had no chance. Their ships were old, their weapons weak, their tactics amateur. The Dominion fleet tore through them like a storm through paper. But they fought. They fought with the desperation of beings who had nothing left to believe in except this moment. They fought knowing they would die. They fought because someone had finally shown them that fighting was possible. Watched the destruction from her bridge. She saw ships explode. She saw escape pods torn apart. She saw beings from across the galaxy give their lives for a cause that had started in the ruins of Sol. She gave her own orders. The last sunrise and its sister ships moved into the battle, not to win. They could not win, but to stand with those who had answered the call. Man the weapons. His shots were precise, careful, choosing targets that mattered. Every kill bought seconds for others to escape. Fought the enemy electronically, scrambling their communications, creating confusion, making them waste shots on phantom targets. Treated the wounded as they were brought to her bay, even as the ship shook with impacts, even as bulkheads buckled and systems failed. They held for 11 hours. When dawn would have come on Earth, the battle finally ended. The Dominion fleet floated amid the wreckage of the rebel ships. Thousands of beings had died. The rebellion had been crushed, but did not feel like a victor. His fleet was damaged, not destroyed, but wounded in ways that should have been impossible. A handful of primitives and slaves had cost him ships, had cost him soldiers, had cost him time and resources that an empire should never have to spend on vermin. And the broadcast had gone out. The entire galaxy had seen it. Every conquered species knew that Throne Prime had been humiliated. Every subject world knew that the Dominion could be hurt. The idea of rebellion had spread to every corner of the Empire. Ship was crippled but not dead, life support failing, weapons destroyed, engines flickering but still transmitting. Contacted her directly. "You have lost." His face appeared on his screen. She was bleeding from a wound on her forehead. Her bridge was filled with smoke. Her crew lay dead or dying around her, and still she smiled. "Have I?" she asked. "Look at what you sacrificed to stop us. Look at what it cost you to defeat a handful of humans and slaves. Now imagine what it will cost you when the next rebellion rises, and the next, and the one after that." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with the fire that had sustained her for 12 years. "We were never going to defeat you with ships and weapons. We were going to defeat you with an idea. The idea that resistance is possible. And you cannot kill an idea, High Prelate. You cannot burn it. You cannot conquer it. It spreads. It grows. It becomes unstoppable." Ordered his ships to finish the last sunrise. But before the killing blow landed, something happened that he would never understand. The human ship's engines flared one final time. It did not try to escape. It did not try to fight. It accelerated directly towards command vessel. Not to destroy it. The last sunrise was too damaged for that. To mark it. The ship crashed into the outer hull of his flagship, carving a burning scar across its surface. When the flames died, there in the metal was a shape that every being in the galaxy would soon recognize. A handprint. Died in that impact. So did the last of her crew. The last sunrise was gone, scattered across the void as debris and memory. But the handprint remained. 6 months later, on a planet called 4, a slave uprising freed 2 million beings from Dominion control. They painted handprints on their banners. A year after that, the Galactic Council met in emergency session to discuss the coordinated resistance movements, appearing across 7 sectors. They could not explain how beings who had been obedient for centuries had suddenly remembered how to rebel. 5 years after the battle, the Dominion faced its first serious threat in 10,000 years. A coalition of former subject species had formed, calling themselves the Free Worlds Alliance. Their symbol was a human handprint. They told stories of the woman who had started it all, the engineer from a dead planet who had refused to accept defeat, the ghost who had taught them that empires could fall, the leader who had given everything for an idea that could not be killed. They called her the First Light. On Earth, in the ruins of Sol, a memorial was built. It was simple, just a stone pillar with a handprint carved into its surface. Below the handprint were words in a dozen languages. "We were here, we fought back, we never surrendered." Had survived the battle. So had and a handful of others. They returned to Earth to lead the continuing resistance, to train new fighters to keep the flame burning. Sometimes, in quiet moments, would visit the memorial. He would place his hand against the carved handprint and remember the woman who had found him dying in the mountains, the woman who had given him purpose when he had none. He would speak to her, even though he knew she could not hear. "We're still fighting," he would say. "We're still here, and we will be here until the last star burns out, because of you, because you showed us what humanity is capable of." The Dominion did not fall in a day. Empires never do. But every crack in their armor, every rebellion that rose, every world that broke free traced its inspiration back to a single woman who had crawled out of the ruins of her world and refused to die. Had made a promise in the darkness of that subway tunnel. She had promised to make the Dominion remember what humans were capable of. They remembered. The galaxy remembered. And the fire she had lit burned on, growing brighter with each passing year, until even the ashes of the mighty could not extinguish it.